When Rex Ryan first weighed in on Shedeur Sanders, he was harsh, another hot take on another unproven rookie. But then the Ravens game happened. Sanders was thrown in cold with no starter reps, no practice timing, and no familiarity with the offense. It wasn't just unorthodox, it was reckless. Ryan watched it unfold and immediately reversed his position.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Instead of criticizing the quarterback, he laid the blame squarely on the Browns, pointing to a system that ignored development in favor of blind hope. This was more than a bad debut, it was a blueprint for failure. Ryan's admission shed light on the deeper issue. NFL teams too often confuse investment with preparation. Sanders wasn't just unprepared, he was never given the tools. And that's not on the player, it's on the people in charge. Rex Ryan doesn't do quiet regrets. When he's wrong, it usually takes a national outcry, a few embarrassing clips, and maybe a highlight reel of a player proving him wrong in real time before he walks it back. Well, guess what? That's exactly what happened after Shedeur Sanders stepped onto an NFL field for the first time against the Baltimore Ravens. Rex had been one of Sanders' loudest critics. Called him unprepared. Said he didn't have it yet. Questioned the Browns' decision to draft him. And at first glance, it was the standard talking point, another rookie quarterback thrown into the NFL spotlight too soon. But then the details came out. And suddenly the conversation shifted. Fast. Because the issue wasn't that Shedeur wasn't ready. The issue was that Cleveland never gave him a shot to be ready. And that's the part that made Rex Ryan backpedal. It turns out Shedeur Sanders wasn't just kept on the sidelines during games, he was completely isolated from the offense in every meaningful way. No first-team reps. No walkthrough integration. No scout team engagement. And when he was finally sent in against the Ravens, the offensive line hadn't even heard his cadence before. And that's not a lack of readiness. That's a lack of basic preparation. You don't need to be a quarterback guru to understand how absurd that is. In the NFL, communication is everything. Cadence is how an offense breathes. It's how you avoid false starts, how you sync with your O-line, how you command a huddle. If your offensive line hasn't practiced hearing your voice, they don't know your rhythm, your timing, or how you call protections. And the Browns waited until a live divisional game, against one of the most aggressive defenses in football, to let that happen for the very first time. That's organizational malpractice. This wasn't a case of a rookie learning on the fly. This was a team using a quarterback like an afterthought. And when things started to fall apart, instead of looking inward, they sent him into the chaos like a test dummy, then stood there watching as the inevitable unfolded. And yet, Shedeur didn't point fingers. He didn't make excuses. He owned it. Despite everything working against him, he walked off that field with his head up and handled the post-game like a pro. But the silence from the Browns? Deafening. No accountability from the coaching staff. No explanation for why their own draft pick was kept out of essential preparation. No acknowledgement of the disconnect between what they told the public about Sanders' potential and how they actually treated him behind the scenes. And this wasn't just a misstep, it was a full-blown exposure of what's broken in Cleveland. Let's talk about that culture for a second. Because this wasn't just about reps. This was about the mood. When Sanders took the field, fans were electric. There was buzz, curiosity, even hope. But on the field? His teammates looked flat, disengaged, like they didn't even believe he should be there. That's a leadership issue. You can feel it in how teams rally, or don't, around a quarterback. If a locker room doesn't respond when a young guy steps in, it means he hasn't been integrated into the team culture. And that's not on him. That's on the organization. Because a rookie QB's confidence doesn't come just from talent. It comes from knowing he has the full weight of the franchise behind him. Shedeur didn't have that. He had a franchise that invested in him on draft day and then pushed him to the margins. And when the plan blew up, they turned to him as a last resort instead of a trusted part of the team's identity. It's not just disappointing, it's dangerous. Because what this does, what it always does, is wreck young careers before they start. The NFL is brutal on quarterbacks. If you don't succeed immediately, the narrative sets in. Then maybe he's not that guy, talk starts. Even when it's not your fault. And Sanders? He wasn't given the structure, the chemistry, or even the reps to succeed. Yet he's the one people will want to put under the microscope. That's why Rex Ryan's shift was so important. Because it opened up the conversation beyond just rookie quarterback struggles. It exposed a pattern of neglect that's been normalized in NFL circles. Draft a player. Don't develop him. Blame him when it goes bad. Repeat. And for Cleveland? This is a pattern they've followed more than once. This time, though, it's different. Because Shedeur Sanders is more than just a draft pick. He's smart, composed, and built for pressure. He doesn't break under media narratives. And despite being set up to fail, he handled the moment with dignity. That speaks volumes. But if the Browns don't course correct right now, they'll lose him. And this won't be a story of a bust. It'll be a story of a player who got away. A quarterback whose talent was wasted by a franchise too obsessed with control, ego, and internal politics to simply let their own investment grow. Because this wasn't about football strategy. This was about organizational dysfunction. It was about a team prioritizing pride over preparation. And it was about a quarterback who deserved better. The Browns still have a chance to fix this. They can choose to invest. To give Shedeur the reps, the coaching, and the structure he needs to grow. They can pull him into the heart of the offense instead of leaving him stranded on the outside looking in. They can make this right. But if they don't? If they continue treating him like a backup project instead of a foundational piece? Then someone else will step in and do what Cleveland wouldn't, build around him. Because no matter what the Ravens game showed on the surface, the truth is deeper. Sanders didn't fail. He was failed. He was thrown into a live NFL game without the one thing every quarterback needs, a team behind him. And if you're wondering why so many young quarterbacks flame out in this league, look no further. It's not always about talent. Sometimes it's about being drafted into a system that pretends to care about development until it's inconvenient. Cleveland had the chance to do this right. They had the offseason, the playbook, the training camp. They had the tools. But they didn't use them. And now the consequences are playing out in real time. Shedeur Sanders didn't get beat by the Ravens. He got left for dead by his own organization. If you're watching this and you're done seeing young quarterbacks sacrificed by front office egos and tone-deaf coaching staffs, hit the like button. Share this video with someone who still thinks Shedeur just wasn't ready. Drop a comment and let us know. Should the Browns double down and build around him, or is it time for Sanders to find a franchise that actually believes in development? And make sure you're subscribed. Because the NFL may be full of highlight reels and game-winning drives, but what happens off the field is where the real stories live. And we're not done yet. And now we're at the crossroads. This isn't just a messy game. It's not just another rookie thrown in too soon. It's a full-blown referendum on the Cleveland Browns' ability to handle quarterback development, and it's not looking good. We've seen this before. Talented prospects land in unstable franchises, and the story doesn't play out like it should. Not because they weren't good enough, but because the environment they were placed in failed to cultivate, protect, and develop their talent. That's exactly what's happening with Shedeur Sanders, and anyone pretending this is just growing pains is either lying to themselves or protecting the people responsible. Let's call it what it is. Cleveland didn't just mishandle Shedeur Sanders. They misled everyone about how seriously they were taking his development. They traded up for him. That's not a minor move. That's an aggressive signal that a franchise sees value, possibly even their future, in a player. But the second the draft weekend headlines faded, so did their attention. Sanders was frozen out of the install. Shut out of meaningful practice. Kept away from the first team. Not even allowed to run the scout team with a purpose. And when the time came to step up, they tossed him into the middle of a war zone, against the Baltimore Ravens of all teams, with no weapons, no armor, and no blueprint. Then stood there and acted like this was all just part of the process. No. This wasn't development. It was abandonment. The most telling part? The locker room didn't respond. That's not on Shedeur. That's what happens when a player hasn't been properly integrated. When leadership fails to prepare not just the quarterback, but the team, for the possibility that he might lead them. You can't expect a roster to rally behind a quarterback when he's been treated like a ghost the entire season. That's not chemistry. That's a leadership void. And if you're still wondering whether this is just one bad game, go back to the basics. The offensive line didn't know his cadence. That's not just a technicality. That is the minimum expectation for a quarterback room operation. Cadence is day one level material. That's what rookie camp is for. That's what OTAs are for. That's what every single rep with the starting unit helps develop. And Shedeur got none of that. Then you put him on the field with 300-pound pass rushers coming at him at full speed, and act like this was some spontaneous opportunity to prove himself? No. This was setting him up to fail while giving the coaching staff plausible deniability. It was a way to check the box. Well, we gave him a shot. without doing any of the work required to make it fair. But the worst part? He handled it. He didn't flinch in the media. He didn't lash out. He didn't leak anything. No passive-aggressive quotes. No cryptic tweets. No throwing teammates or coaches under the bus. He stood there, took the heat, and owned every part of a situation that wasn't his to begin with. That tells you more about Shedeur Sanders than anything else. That tells you that the mental toughness is real. That tells you the professionalism is there. And that tells you, most of all, that this is a player worth fighting for. And the Browns? They should be doing just that. They should be going out of their way to fix this. To rebuild the trust. To admit the failure and actually commit to a real development plan. But instead, nothing. No addressing the lack of reps. No meaningful support shown publicly. No signal that Sanders is part of the offensive future. Just more silence. And that silence is loud. It's loud to fans. It's loud to analysts. It's loud to the locker room. And it's loud to Shedeur himself. Because let's not forget, players hear everything. They know when they're being treated like part of the plan versus part of the backup file. And when you're drafted as the future, and then handled like an afterthought. That leaves a mark. And that's the real damage here. This isn't about one bad outing. It's about what this outing revealed. It exposed how fragile the quarterback development pipeline is in Cleveland. How easily ego and politics can overpower structure and logic. And how quickly a promising career can be derailed if a team isn't willing to do the hard work of actually building around someone. Shedeur Sanders isn't a project. He's a professional. He's poised. He's patient. He's mentally tough. But none of those traits will matter if he's stuck in a system that refuses to invest in him. And make no mistake, if Cleveland doesn't act, another team will. Because despite what happened on the field, Sanders showed the kind of character that coaches dream of. And if he's ever placed in a system that values patience, reps, and structure, he's going to thrive. And that's when the conversation will shift again. Because right now, the Browns still have control of the narrative. They can make this right. They can take responsibility. They can rally around Sanders, give him the support he's earned, and change the trajectory of both his career and the team's reputation. But if they don't, then this story will play out the same way it always does. A young quarterback leaves, develops elsewhere, succeeds, and the franchise that drafted him becomes a cautionary tale. The NFL is full of these stories. But it doesn't have to be this one. Cleveland had a chance to show they were different. They had a chance to take a young, talented, intelligent quarterback and develop him the right way. With purpose. With planning. With support. But they didn't. They did nothing. And now everyone's watching. Let's get brutally honest here. What happened with Shedeur Sanders in that Ravens game wasn't just a misstep. It was a full-blown indictment of how the Cleveland Browns operate behind closed doors. It peeled back the curtain on a franchise that talks big about building for the future, then actively undermines that future when it finally arrives. Sidelined, because for all the PR flash about trading up for Sanders and believing in his upside, their actions told a completely different story. You don't bury a quarterback all offseason, deny him practice reps with the starters, exclude him from walkthroughs, and then act shocked when he struggles in a game situation that you never prepared him for. That's not just mismanagement. That's sabotage disguised as strategy. And let's be clear, Sanders didn't step into a game with a week of starter reps under his belt. He didn't benefit from a gradual buildup, a plan, or even a fraction of the support system that most young quarterbacks need. He stepped into chaos. And the coaching staff? They didn't just hand him a live playbook. They handed him a live grenade. And then watched it blow up. The Ravens' defense is no joke. This isn't a team you use to test a young quarterback. This is a defense known for disguises, pressure, and pouncing on hesitation. And yet, the Browns didn't protect him with quick throws. They didn't simplify the offense. They didn't even give him a rhythm. They just tossed him in like a spare part and hoped for the best. And let's talk about what hoping for the best looks like in the NFL. It looks like disconnection. It looks like your O-line not recognizing your cadence. It looks like your receivers out of sync with your timing. It looks like a locker room unsure of who's in charge. And on that field, that's exactly what it looked like. And still, Shedeur Sanders carried himself like a pro. No pouting. No slouching on the bench. No slamming tablets. No drama. He stayed focused. He stayed calm. He did everything you want from a young quarterback under pressure, except he did it without the resources, the reps, or the preparation to make it work. That's not failure. That's resilience under fire. But it's also something else. It's a test of the Browns' leadership. Because now the ball's not in Sanders' court. It's in theirs. And the question is whether they'll step up and admit what went wrong, or hide behind excuses and throw him under the bus. So far, it's been nothing but silence. And that silence speaks volumes. It tells you that this team doesn't see Sanders as a priority. They see him as expendable. A placeholder. A body they can plug in without consequence. And if it doesn't work, shrug and move on. That's what's broken. It's because the great franchises, they don't do this. They don't draft a quarterback and forget about him until it's too late. They don't treat development like a luxury. They build, they plan, they prepare, and they take accountability when things go wrong. The Browns? They ghosted the process entirely. And the fallout isn't just a shaky debut, it's long-term damage. Because now Sanders has to battle perception, not just performance. Now he has to climb out of a hole that wasn't dug by his talent, but by the people who should have been nurturing it. And let's not gloss over what that does to a young player. It chips away at confidence. It creates doubt, not just from the outside world but internally. It forces a player to constantly prove themselves in an environment that never set them up to succeed in the first place. And that's the tragic irony here. The Browns used their draft capital on a quarterback with the mental toughness, the pedigree, the intelligence, and the maturity to lead. And then they treated him like an afterthought. Like a break glass in case of emergency option. And now they're acting confused that it didn't look seamless? You know what else didn't look seamless? The complete lack of leadership from the coaching staff. The absolute absence of support from the sidelines. The fact that not a single voice, head coach, OC, GM, stepped up post-game and said, "That one's on us. We didn't get him ready." That's what accountability looks like. And it's nowhere to be found in Cleveland right now. Instead, the blame is being quietly shifted. The narrative is being massaged. People are hoping it fades from the headlines. But the truth doesn't go away. The tape doesn't lie. And people like Rex Ryan? They're not letting this one slide. Because even he, loud, brash, brutally honest Rex Ryan, backtracked when the reality became clear. His early criticism? Gone. His tone? Completely reversed. Because he saw it wasn't Sanders' fault. It was a systemic failure. And say what you will about Rex, but when even he takes a step back and points the finger at the organization, you know the dysfunction is too obvious to deny. So where do we go from here? Well, that depends on Cleveland. They can continue pretending like this was just a developmental hiccup. They can keep Sanders on the fringe of the game plan. They can let politics and ego rule the locker room. And they can watch another promising player slip through their fingers. Or, they can grow up. They can own the failure. They can reset the development plan. They can give Sanders real reps, real preparation, real belief. They can start treating him like a quarterback worth building around, not just a draft pick they don't want to admit they mishandled. Because make no mistake, there are 31 other teams watching. They see the poise, they see the upside, and they see the way Cleveland has fumbled this. And if the Browns don't act, someone else will. Someone else will give Sanders what Cleveland wouldn't, a real chance, a structure, a game plan. A locker room that rallies around him. And when that happens, when he finds success elsewhere, the story won't be about how he turned things around. It'll be about how Cleveland let it happen. And they'll have no one to blame but themselves. And at this point, we've seen enough to call it exactly what it is, a franchise failure, not a player failure. When you take a quarterback with Shedeur Sanders' potential, his football IQ, his confidence, his pedigree, and you give him nothing to work with, you're not testing him. You're burning him. You're turning what could be the foundation of your team into a cautionary tale. And still, the Browns haven't taken responsibility. Not once has a coach stepped up to say, "We didn't get him ready." Not once has anyone in the building acknowledged the complete lack of preparation. Because admitting that would mean acknowledging the deeper truth, that ego and poor leadership, not football decisions, are running the show in Cleveland. This wasn't about wins and losses. This wasn't even about performance. It was about priorities. And clearly, developing Shedeur Sanders was never one of them. You can see it in the silence from the front office. You can feel it in the lifeless sideline when he went under center. No one stood up. No one clapped him on the back. No one treated him like the future. It was like watching a team send someone out to take a hit so they wouldn't have to. And what did Shedeur do? He handled it. He faced the media. He took the blame. He answered the questions that his coaches should have been answering. And he did it with more maturity than the entire Browns leadership group combined. That tells you something. That tells you this kid isn't the problem. He's the one thing that went right in a completely avoidable disaster. So now the question is, how much longer is this going to be allowed to continue? Because every week that goes by without first-team reps, every practice that excludes him from real development, every game plan that ignores his skill set, is another week wasted. Another step toward letting another quarterback with real talent disappear under the weight of bad management. The NFL doesn't hand out second chances easily. And the Browns are blowing his first one. So unless they fix this, unless they wake up and realize they still have a shot to develop a legitimate starter, it's going to go down like all the others. Another draft pick with promise. Another fan base sold a dream. Another opportunity wasted. If you're tired of seeing young quarterbacks get chewed up by dysfunction, you know what to do. Hit the like button. Share this with someone who still thinks Shedeur just needs time. Drop a comment. Should the Browns give him the keys, or is it already too late? And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Because we're not just talking football, we're talking facts, failures, and the fallout they never show you in the... And trust me, this story? It's far from over.